Welcome to Lotus Talks, brought to you by Lotus Communication Network, and I'm Kalinga Seneviratne. Today we are going to discuss the issue of Buddhist humanitarian relief during the early period of the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. Unlike the Christian and Muslim communities, Buddhists seem to lack a well-coordinated international Buddhist relief network. This was laid bare during the Asian tsunami crisis in 2004, which hit Buddhist communities, particularly in Sri Lanka and Thailand. Have the Buddhists in Asia learned any lessons from that experience? And were they able to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic more effectively? So we will be discussing this topic in today's program. Joining us to discuss these issues are Venerable Dr Dhammapiya, Secretary General of the International Buddhist Confederation from New Delhi, Gauthama Prabhu, President of the Tamil Buddhist Association from Chennai in India, Dr. Victory, President of GEM Buddhist Fellowship from Malaysia, and Henry Boey, Vice President of the International Buddhist Confederation from Singapore. Welcome to you all. By looking at the beginnings, when COVID-19 infected South Asia, many of the Buddhist communities were badly affected, especially in India and Nepal. Many Buddhists in India come from some of the poorest communities in the country. Venerable Dhammapiya, can you explain how Buddhist communities in the region were affected by COVID-19 and what were the immediate needs of the communities?
In the first wave, it was almost full lockdown. India was under full lockdown from March 2020 for many months. Many of our devotees, the Buddhist practitioners, they had to stick to their homes, could not go out to work. Those who were in government jobs, it was okay for them. They got salary, monthly salary to survive, to sustain their families. But those who used to earn their livelihood, their daily work or daily wages, or in the farmhouse, or working in industries, or this some factories or shops or business, all that were almost closed down. So it really affected financially, economically, and also emotionally, mentally, it affected much. So what we have done, we had organized interfaith meeting, not dialogue, but meeting with different faith leaders in India, quite several meetings, where we try to know which organization, which religious organizations or the faith leaders were doing what in which part of the country, and how we could coordinate. So we Buddhists also have really done. Of course, we have not projected or publicized much because the Buddhist people have an understanding. When you do a good work, you do with a good intention, not for publicity. First, the problem we have seen, that was the basic problem, the basic requirement, like fooding actually, in the first wave. Because the lockdown was for a long time. So no business, no activities, nothing kind of thing for almost 5-6 months. So there was a shortage of food, a shortage of essential requirements. So that was the main focus, and we have tried our best to reach out to our monastics or nunneries or these lay people that you might see in some of the YouTubes. Maybe some of our people they have uploaded, but not all. That was in the first phase.
Let me bring in Gauthama here. What were your particular community's needs?
The first phase was a little bit of a shock for most of us because we are not, first of all, familiar to handle the situation of COVID. I must regret to say that India was not prepared to face such a big catastrophe. So the first phase, as most Venerable Dhammapiya was sharing, that it was more challenging in terms of the livelihood and the conditions of poverty was completely, I would say, alarming, because when there's this lockdown which was being imposed, it was the poorest of the poor which got severely affected, because there are people who were able to stock their foods and resources. Those people who could afford stocks to be, reserved for their own family consumptions and domestic consumption. But whereas for the poor, it has been a challenge, because especially the daily wage workers, for them it was extremely challenging, and they have to earn something every day, and only then they will be able to overcome their economic crisis at home. So when the pandemic outbreak took place in India during 2020, if you see the cases in April, it was increasing like anything from April, and every week there was this analysis which was done by different research institutes and also the government itself. So there was a sporadic exponential increase in the number of cases. And at the same time, when you see the unemployment rate, it was going like anything from 7% until like 25%, almost close to 25% of unemployment in India during the phase of what I would say from March until the end of April. And that was one of the reasons why our foundation, we felt that there is an immediate need for helping the poor, reaching the poor, especially those who are relying on day-to-day work, be it in the agrarian sector or the labor sector. And we set up community kitchen. We supported through a foundation close to about some 150,000 beneficiaries, different slums in Tamil Nadu. And we also had an opportunity to work with the transgender community, because most of the transgender community in India are surviving only on two livelihoods. One is based upon sex work, and the commercial sex work. The second one is in terms of begging in the streets. So for them, there is no other scope. So we try to reach the LGBT communities of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and we did extend our hands and supported as much as possible. And then we had the nomadic community. We have the communities such as the Narikorovar communities, who keeps it's like a gypsy community. They keep wandering. So for them also it was quite a bit of a challenge. So we try to reach them as well, try to extend our community service to them. And apart from that, we also try to help the Buddhist minority communities. We did a small work with the help of Most Venerable Kemchara to reach the brothers and sisters from Tripura. And not only that, we are running the ongoing health campaigns. What happened was during the time of pandemic, that the hospital was overwhelmingly populated with the COVID positive patients. So what happened was that people who were undergoing treatments, life-saving treatments, such as like cancer treatment or eye surgeries, which is very important, all got delayed. So one of the campaigns that we did through the foundation was to ensure support is being extended to the poor, especially to undergo treatments, life-saving treatments, like we were been supporting the children with retinoblastoma. It's called the eye cancer. So we supported close to about some 250 children who were undergoing treatment in Hyderabad. We did close to about some 700 cataract surgeries with the tie-up with different hospitals in Hyderabad, in Noida, as well as in Chennai. So this happened during the time of the first phase. These are the challenges that we saw. The second wave was more, I would say, terrible, because we lost so many lives. If you ask me personally, I lost close to about some 50 of my close relatives and friends. So it's quite catastrophic, I would say. We have lost so many lives. And one of the biggest challenges that we faced in our country was the oxygen shortage. So there was a big demand for supporting hospitals with oxygen concentrators.
Let me bring Victor and Henry into discussion now. maybe Victor, I'll ask you first. Gautam also mentioned about the issue of oxygen. And I know both Victor and Henry were involved in sourcing this and sending it to India and also, I suppose, Nepal and possibly Sri Lanka. Can you explain about how this, how the community, the Buddhist community in your countries, in Malaysia and Singapore, was mobilized?
Yes, maybe just Carl, just taking off from where you started by saying that actually the Buddhist community itself is not very well known to respond quickly to cases like disasters, and we are not known. I would say that actually many Buddhists have contributed, but they might not probably do it under specific Buddhist organizations. Except, for instance, you have the case of Turkey International Foundation, which has which has a whole network across the world, and now the Buddhists are being able to kind of distinguish themselves with that. I think when India was being hit by the pandemic, we in Malaysia have been following the pandemic very closely since the outbreak in Wuhan and the lockdown that was done in Wuhan, and Malaysia itself has suspended flights from China. And we saw the figures creeping up. But the cases was growing, but we saw that in the case of India, it was actually particularly bad, especially with in the social media and all that. And now I think because we are also organized under the International Buddhist Confederation, internationally with Bante Dhammapiya, as a Sajjan. And also in Malaysia, we have an equivalent of the IBC Malaysia. And because of this kind of network that we have, we thought that why don't we try to do something for India? Obviously, transferring funds and all that, to help with the poor, it's not something that we can actually easily do because of the constraints to transferring of funds. But we felt that the area that we can actually help with will be the medical supplies. And so we started a campaign under the IBC Malaysia. After discussing with the RBC World in India, we were talking about how to supply the medical equipment to India, because the Indian hospitals were very short in oxygen concentrators, and this is something that as Malaysians we feel that we can it's something that we can actually do. So after the discussion with Venerable Dhammapiya, we got the Theravada Buddhist community in Malaysia, because we have a council for the Theravada group, and we presented them the idea of how about us collaborating as an aid to India and Nepal, and we say it is the Buddhist homeland, and we feel that it is something that we like to do together. And in addition, we also reach out to Turkey because Turkey does have a big network, and we explored on how we can collaborate in order to help India and Nepal. So we had these online meetings with Buddhist societies in Turkey, and very quickly we launched a fundraising campaign in May, and 3 weeks of fundraising actually yielded very good results, because we have contributions not only from Malaysia but also from Singapore, from Indonesia, from Australia. They started contributing to this initiative of trying to help out the situation in India and Nepal. And together we were able to procure 950 oxygen concentrators, 2,000 units of oxygen cylinders, 1.5 million gloves, that was from Top Glove, and 58,300 pieces of N95 masks, and 2,000 sets of the PPE kits. And this was actually shipped over to India and Nepal. Actually, this has actually given us a lot of encouragement to see that amongst the Buddhist community itself, we can actually get our act together in order to respond to a situation like that. Even as we're giving aid to India and Nepal, we were also anticipating that the COVID cases in Malaysia itself would actually, spike up. And so 3 months after the situation of India, we had to get ourselves organized again, and this time in order to raise funds for Malaysians.
Now let me bring Henry into this. Now I was following your Facebook postings during the time. You were involved in sending aid to Sri Lanka through Buddhist links, isn't it? Can you explain how that was put together?
Now, how this thing all began with the Sri Lanka project actually is just immediately after the India project that we did. And the India project came about because I was contacted by our brothers from Malaysia, IBC Malaysia, Brother Lai, and he mentioned about whether we could assist in this project, provide medical supplies to India and Nepal. And he explained the setup. IBC in India would do the distribution, and the supply would come from China, a particular factory in China which they had experience with. So that was very important, the supply chain. So having the supply chain in place, it was just approaching donors in Singapore, in particular Buddhist donors. Now, we are fortunate that in the Buddhist practice, we have the practice of karuna and also metta, and the mental state of chaga as well. So Buddhists were very responsive when they knew that there were people dying. When I first got the message, I placed an order for 50 units of oxygen concentrator with the factory through the local agent in Malaysia. And within 4 days, it was all snapped up, which to my surprise, it just snapped up in 4 days. So I placed another 50 units, which within a week, in 2 days, it was snapped up. That's 100 units. So I placed another order 50, and we managed to ship 150. We were hard pressed for time because Malaysia had a head start, IBC Malaysia, and they were already in the process of placing the final order. So I had a very short window to act on this. And but fortunately to our kalamitas in Singapore, our links to the various groups, we were able to mobilize very quickly. So within, I say about 2 weeks or so, we managed to gather all these 150 units and had them ordered to be placed and shipped from China direct to New Delhi. In Singapore, the peculiarity is charities and organizations are not allowed to transfer funds or collect money for overseas fundraising. It is meant locally for local only. So all this effort has to go through individuals. So it's a word of mouth and through groups from various Buddhist organizations, the word was spread. And it was a very hectic 2 weeks or so, but was very fulfilling and inspiring when so many came on board. Like the last tsunami aid you mentioned about 2004. There was a tsunami of compassion that came from around the world. But unfortunately, there were a lot of problems that arise from not only logistics, but that people on the ground who did not do what they're supposed to do. A lot of Buddhist donors were very disappointed. So this time around with IBC on the ground, it helped greatly. So I had to do some convincing and there were skeptics. So I had to do a lot of this, and the India aid was useful because IBC did a good job in India in providing updates on the distribution, photographs and where was how many units are going here and there. So I updated all those using my Facebook to those who supported and sent out to all those using our chats and so on, like WhatsApp and Telegram. For the India one, so with this background, there was more confidence. So we raised even more for the Sri Lanka ones. Sri Lanka Airlines came on board to fly this to Sri Lanka, Colombo. Foreign Secretary himself asked that we look at they have a COVID flight from China, from Beijing, and he managed to get our consignment on board that flight. That helped a lot because we could ship the whole lot that for Sri Lanka. So this was an experience with our aid to India and Sri Lanka.
Widen the scope of the discussion to Buddhist humanitarian assistance, because Victor mentioned the name Toshi Foundation, and another big Buddhist organization which has millions of dollars to its disposal is the Buddhist Global Aid, run by Bhikkhu Boey from the US. Now, I have found both these organizations dispose millions of dollars, and very often this goes to non-Buddhist communities across the world, to Buddhist communities in South Asia and Southeast Asia, that they're among some of the poorest in these countries. And they are at the mercy of especially Christian evangelical groups who have a motivation of converting people, as you know. How can we overcome this lack of networking? Like, I suppose in the Asian context, Toshi could be more encouraged to work with IBC, for example, and other Buddhist organizations to channel specific aid into Buddhist communities who are in need.
When you're talking about this creating coordinated Buddhist International Disaster Relief Network to be initiated by IBC, IBC has its own technical problem. That is, we are not in a position to receive foreign fund yet. To receive any foreign fund, Indian organization, any NGO organization need to have permission from Minister of Home Affairs. It's called FCRA, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Under that, we have to get registered. It is very strict now in India. Transferring fund to India was almost difficult or impossible at that time. And even if it was possible also, it would have been difficult for us to receive. If IBC is to create something like this, coordinated Buddhist International Disaster Relief Network that we can propose, but we do not know whether it will be approved or not approved. But IBC can definitely go ahead with this kind of initiative if IBC has FCRA clearance, so that we can mobilize funds from different places around the world and disaster relief activities. And when as far as Suchi is concerned, Suchi Foundation is concerned, I think Suchi Foundation has its own clear objective. It is not only for Buddhist cause. If we are to work on this line, help or relief materials to Buddhist communities, wherever it is affected in the world, then maybe we have to come together, like with Suchi, and you are saying the Bhikkhu Buddhist organization or some other organization together. We can have a different kind of entity or organization that will coordinate and reach out to the Buddhist world. I think that is what we can do.
Yeah, I was also thinking about whether IBC should set up a subsidiary in a third country. Victor and Henry. Now, Henry, I know Singapore is also not an easy place to do this. The laws have been tightened in recent years, especially with the operations of religious organizations. And also, Henry, you mentioned earlier about the problems you have with money being transferred overseas. What about Malaysia? I was thinking of Malaysia or Thailand as a possible destination to set up IBC, like what Venerable Dhammapiya said, the subsidiary of IBC. Is it possible in Malaysia?
Yes, actually, Kel, it's the same thing as Singapore, because we are part of the, the money laundering, because which becomes a serious problem. So all of banking institutions have actually tightened up the regulations. Sending funds, overseas, especially, itself becomes difficult. So if you like to do things, it would have basically to be done through a kind of a personal initiative. For organizations, it's difficult. In the case of Turkey, what happens is that they were established in order to help people, spirit of compassion, regardless of religious affiliations. And I think it's because of that they're able to carry out the activities in countries that are non-Buddhist countries. So one part of the work of Suchi, it can be appreciated because it is actually the act of compassion to all.
Yeah, I have noticed Global Buddhist Relief, which is based in the US, has access to funding from organizations like Oxfam and many others, which they spend on disaster relief and development projects. And I note, because I am on their mailing list, and I noticed a lot of the projects are not in Buddhist communities too. They are projects which are really applying Buddhist compassion, is really for people in need. Okay, then thank you very much for every one of you for putting the time into joining this discussion.